Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the Target Setting mini-series, everyone. This is Christos Xenofondos, Assistant Director with the Rhode Island DOT. I am here representing the TPM Pooled Fund Lead and ASHTO's Committee on Performance-Based Management Vice Chairs. Thank you to all of you for joining us today and welcome to this latest episode that is going to cover target setting for system performance measures. We are happy to see so many of you on the line today. For more information on the TPM webinar series, just visit the TPM portal at tpm-portal.com and click on the TPM webinar series under events in the main menu. Links to the video and slides from today's webinar and also archive content from previous webinars, in addition to other helpful tools and resources, can be found on the TPM portal. The special 5-part TPM target setting webinar mini-series will wrap up in 2 weeks. If you have not already registered for the 5th episode, I encourage you to head straight to the TPM portal after this webinar and register. If you have any questions for the presenters during today's webinar, as well as any suggestions for future webinar topics, please submit them using the webinar's Q&A feature on the control panel. We will answer all of the questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We're looking forward to a great discussion today. Thank you for being here and thank you to our panelists. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Harty from ASHTO for a welcome on behalf of ASHTO. Matt?
Great, thanks Christos. This is Matt Harty. I'm the Program Director for Planning and Performance Management here at ASHTO. Fresh off 2 weeks with the Boy Scouts. I was up in the Boundary Waters up there in Minnesota, which was beautiful for 1 week, and then I was out in West Virginia, near Beckley, West Virginia for a week doing outing type activities. So it's good to be back and talking about transportation, not canoeing type or zip lining type transportation. So this webinar series is being sponsored by the TPM Pooled Fund. So this is in cooperation with ASHTO and with FHWA. So thank you to our partners over at FHWA. They are very valuable, very useful, very helpful as we all go along this sort of performance management series. And we're all very pleased to sponsor this Transportation Performance Management webinar series. The purpose of the webinar series is to support the broader transportation performance management community by sharing lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the transportation performance management community. We're happy to see another great turnout for our 4th episode of the Target Setting mini-series today. I think we had upwards of 400 people register for it. Right now we have about 250 people on. So it's great to see so many people interested and wanting to learn more and learn from others. And we've got a great lineup of presenters today to talk about target setting for the PM3 reliability measures. I think you're really going to enjoy the webinar and hopefully take away some lessons learned and something that you can sort of take and implement within your agency. I do want to say a big thank you to all the presenters and all the panelists with us today. And also I want to say thank you to SpyPond and the SpyPond team, Yana, Andrew, Lori, everybody there who without them this wouldn't be a reality. So thank you to the SpyPond team. Y'all are doing a great job. And with that, I will hand over to Yana Park from SpyPond to share our agenda for today's webinar. Yana?
Thanks, Matt. And thank you to you, Matt, for making all of this possible as well. So as Matt said already, we're going to focus on state target setting approaches for federal PM3 reliability measures. But before I jump into the agenda, I'll mention that the final webinar in this target setting mini series will focus on the congestion/emissions CMAQ performance measures. We have a great set of speakers lined up, and I hope you'll be able to join us for that session in 2 weeks. For the agenda today, Nelson Hoffman from the Federal Highway Transportation Performance Management Team will provide an overview and federal perspective on target setting for PM3 reliability measures. And then we'll have Subrat Mahapatra from the Maryland DOT State Highway Administration, who will kick off our agency presentations with a presentation on the challenges and opportunities the agency has faced in setting system performance targets in this time of uncertainty. Next, we're going to hear from Sudhir Joshi, who's from the New Jersey DOT, and will present their approach for setting reliability targets. Following Sudhir, we'll hear from Dan Blevins of the Wilmington Area Planning Council in Delaware, who will focus on coordination and cooperation on target setting in the WILMAPCO region. Then we'll have Michael Iacano from MnDOT, who will wrap up our agency presentations with their approach and challenges in setting system performance measures. So just a reminder, please remember to submit your comments and questions using the Q&A feature on the webinar control panel at any time during today's presentations. And as always, we'll make the slides and video available after today's webinar at tpm-portal.com. You can download a PDF of the presentation, I think right now, but I was just looking and I'm not sure you can do that. So if you cannot do it right now, look for it on the TPM portal. All right, let's get started with a welcome and introduction of system performance target setting by Nelson Hoffman of Federal Highways. Nelson is the FHWA TPM program manager responsible for policy and guidance. Please join me in welcoming Nelson.
Great, thank you very much for the introduction. And we are just gonna, so I'm gonna spend a few minutes with you today to talk about the performance management form and available resources. I actually don't seem to have the, there we go, little technical setup to get to, all right, so, and yeah, sorry for the delay there. So really what I want to talk with everyone about, I know there's, we've got 250 people here and we're going to hear some really great detailed presentations about system performance. And I just want to set up some framework for how folks who are not deeply familiar with the subject or people who are, so what are some of the available resources? And then also, what are some very soon upcoming deadlines for us to pay attention to? So what I put up onto the screen is the FHWA Transportation Performance Management website. And this website has a vast amount of resources. And I just want to do a quick tour to look at things that are particular to system performance, but also things that are general. And I really want to encourage folks who haven't visited this site, or even if you have visited this site, we do update to this site pretty regularly, adding presentations, webinar, different information. And so it's really a valuable site to take a look at. One thing I want to mention is that the upcoming requirements for the performance period, which is the mid-performance period progress report. And that is due this October the 1st, and that's a statewide, that's a submittal from all of the, nationwide, but all of the state DOTs are going to do a submittal that's due October the 1st into what we refer to as the performance management form. Now, I'm not going to show you that right now, but that system is still under test, and it's going to open up September the 1st for the submittal, which is due October the 1st. Then there's going to be a 2-week period up until October the 16th of review of the submittal by the Federal Highway division offices working with their state DOT partners to ensure that that it's a complete submittal. Then at the end of October. Actually, the PMF is going to lock on November the 2nd, and then that data will be archived and analysis will take place. But in preparation for the opening of the PMF, the Performance Management Form, what is in the PMF, that information is already available. So if you go to the FHWA Transportation Performance Management website and you click on guidance, under guidance, this top link here brings us to the documentation that makes up the performance management form. And if I'm going to just jump to a spot in it. So right here, this is farther down into the document that talks about the system performance and reliability. Farther on, there's specific information about the questions that are going to be asked for freight. So, again, it's important to be aware that if you're interested in the information that's going to be required under the PMF, this document is all currently available. So I'm going to go back to our main site and talk a little bit about the resources, and then I'm going to turn it over to the presenters. But there is plenty of information for somebody who is a novice to TPM, somebody who has sort of a mid-range understanding, and I think even folks who have a certain level of expertise in TPM that can find valuable resources here. One of the things that I think is important to look at is I just clicked on, go back, sorry, going a little bit fast. It's down here at regulations. If you're to click on regulations, it brings you to this information that links the TPM elements to the regulations and statutes. But I want to highlight this link over here. These two links, though it looks split, it's actually the same link. And it brings us to the rulemaking. And I know that for those of us who have been involved in TPM for a while, rulemaking was a few years ago, but this site, the heading of this site, has some great fact sheets, background information. You know, today we're talking about system performance. And so as you go through these presentations, you know, after, you know, you've attended this webinar, if you have some additional questions or you'd like to find out some more background information, I would suggest coming to the TPM Federal Highways website, and you can gather quite a bit of basic information and some more in-depth information from the website. So with that, I'm going to turn it back and look forward to watching the presenters.
Thanks, Nelson, for that introduction. So the handout is downloadable on the menu bar. So if you want to look at the slides or follow along or just have it, just go ahead and do that from the webinar menu bar. So another reminder, if you have questions for the speakers, just enter them in the Q&A panel, and we're going to take them in the order that they come in at the end of the webinar after all the presentations have been made. Our first state DOT presentation this afternoon, we'll hear from Subrat Mahapatra of Maryland State SHA. Subrat is the Deputy Director at SHA's Office of Transportation, Mobility, and Operations, where he oversees the development and implementation of TSMO and CAV programs. At SHA, Subrat spent 12 years in the Office of Planning, leading various data analytics and performance management efforts before moving into operations. Subrat serves on numerous panels in the TSMO and performance management areas. And now I'll turn it over to Subrat.
Thank you, Hannah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
And you can see my screen as well, I'm assuming.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. So thank you. Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone and their families, co-workers are all doing fine considering the unique circumstances we are all in, which has almost become a new normal. Want to start by thanking the TPM pooled fund study led by Christos and ASTO Federal Highway for their partnership and their support, and the consulting firm SpyPond in this case for organizing these web series for our peer DOTs to continue the performance management conversations going. So I appreciate all the good work that is happening on the screen and behind the screens leading up to these presentations. So I will cover a lot of ground, but the whole idea is not to go into the numbers per se, but to see some unique trends. And I believe that we are not alone considering the unique challenges that we as DOTs, MPOs, and locals are facing these days. And more importantly, what it has to do with the existing system performance and the target setting process and everything else that behooves upon us. So with that, let me advance my.
So Brad, if you go to the bottom, there you go.
Yeah. So the brief outline here is I was going to start by talking about the 2018 target establishment efforts back then that sets the stage for the mid-year adjustment, and specifically talk about where we are as an industry, as a state DOT, and talk about some of the next steps. Wanted to acknowledge my colleague Mark Ege, a data scientist at High Street Consulting, that is the brains behind some of these advanced models that we could develop for our target establishment. So back then, a couple of years back, seems like yesterday, but again, this was a statistical model that we built based off Maryland data, looking at the relationship between reliability and, as everyone knows, volume, capacity, roadway characteristics, ton of research. The SOT2 implementation in the reliability arena gave us some unique research products that we could leverage. The bottom line was we were able to develop the relationship between reliability to various roadway characteristics and use that model to develop targets. And having the statistical model in hand, what we also accounted for the fact back then was different roadway segments in different parts of Maryland. There is a reason why Maryland is called America in miniature. There is a lot happening in Maryland, in the central Maryland, but very unique characteristics in the Appalachian region, Western Maryland, and Eastern Shore. But also accounting for the fact that we had a ton of projects in the making, various stages of construction, opening to traffic and whatnot. So the whole idea was, if you had a good idea of the volumes, the growth rates, and the projects that were going to open up to traffic, that gave us a lens to look at reliability. And here there were some actual, we calibrated the models for existing conditions and set out mid-year and 4-year targets back then. What we did was we took a performance, a scenario-based approach, and what we did was accounting for different growth rates, the normal growth rate based on past performance, and also accounting for the fact that if the economy grew at a faster pace, and also looking at some of the traditional constraints, whether it's a no build because of various reasons or a build scenario. We presented the findings of these scenarios to leadership and our MPO partners and other stakeholders, and we settled on the build scenario with expected growth for setting our targets. And from a little bit about the model, it explains about 20 to 30% of the unreliability, reliability, explain variation, but if you add the weather events and some of the planned events, you are looking at 50 to 60% explanation, but there is 40 to 50% or more than that is unexplained. But the whole idea was this was a system level metric, and we wanted to make sure that the model was sensitive to demand changes, volume changes, capacity changes. And back then, we had identified these parameters, roadway network changes, the PM3 score calculation methodologies, the TMC network changes, economic factors, and project uncertainties, with the idea that mid-year 2020, we will be in a position to reevaluate whether or not we are in line with meeting our 4-year targets or not. And here we are. I don't think anyone predicted COVID, a pandemic, and negative growth back then, but here we are. So talking about with that context, I wanted to talk about the mid-period performance and the triggers and the parameters that are impacting our decisions for either revisiting our 4-year target or staying the course. What you would see in here is a table where we are looking at the interstate reliability performance and the non-interstate NHS performance and the truck reliability index. Again, folks on this call, I'm assuming everyone is familiar with these. So the stars you see on this graph are the ones, are the actuals, and the trend lines, the dotted lines are the trend lines that we had developed back then. As you can see from here, the actual for 2019 is 69.4%. So clearly we did not meet our trend line, 72.1%. But on the truck side of things, we are doing good. And that's when we started diving into why did we not meet the target, to make sure that are we accounting for the readjustment or not. Same story with the truck travel time reliability index. So when you look at these parameters, I will talk about last 3 parameters because those are impacting more than any other parameters. I don't know the story about other state DOTs, but we saw significant changes in the TMC network delineations between the network that we started our efforts with NPM RDS version 2 back in 2018 to the network that we have right now. And when we took a deep dive, we saw that the segments that were the TMC that had reliable interstate mileages have been for some reason removed. And we know that those denominators have an impact on reliability. The other thing that happened on the project side of things, again, this is an example. I-270 is a major commuter corridor with high levels of unreliability. There was a ICM project in the works, which had a lot of active traffic management elements. But because we are looking at a P3 possible collaboration opportunity, some of that scope items got retweaked. So, for example, some of the ATM strategies that should have been there, we took a pause on those strategies. And naturally, that impacts these project level decisions, whether the projects came on time or got rescoped, has an impact on reliability. Last but not the least is the economic factors, and that puts us right into where we are with the COVID pandemic and everything that it has come with. So I will talk a little bit about the uncertainties that we are all in, and I think folks on this call can resonate. Demand uncertainty, supply uncertainty, and the policy and recovery time uncertainty. These are the 3 main events that are going to guide our decisions as a department, as an industry. Again, I'm pretty sure in your own DOTs, in your own programs, you might be looking at traffic volumes through ATRs and other means. There are tons of dashboards out there. But in the peak of peak, Maryland experienced roughly 50 to 60% decrease in traffic volumes. Now, over the past few weeks, the volumes have come up, but now we are at a stable 15 to 20% volume drop. And what does that do to reliability? I think everyone on this call can identify that when there is less peak hour congestion, the roads are more stable and hence the reliability improves. So post-March, you could see that whether it's the interstates or whether it's the non-interstate highways, NHS, you saw a significant increase in reliability of the facilities. Same deal on the freight side of things, give or take, we are 15 to 20% down compared to last year conditions. And that has a positive bearing on reliability. Again, volume drops in the facilities, less congestion, more SOC absorptions, and then the system regains time quickly and systems becomes reliable. So that is the trend that we are noticing on our facilities. Now, the question becomes, what does that do to target setting? On the supply side, again, I don't think we are any unique here in Maryland. Fewer VMT translates into fewer transportation dollars. The transit ridership, airport travel, everything is down, which means less transportation dollars revenues coming into the coffers. Our 6-year consolidated transportation program has been significantly decreased because of state budget cuts. So fewer and further state of good repair activities, some projects put on hold, construction programs going on, but not to the level that we would want. So big time supply implications. And here we are. What does this mean? National policy, state policy, it doesn't have to be transportation. It could be a stay-at-home order or something else. The funding uncertainty and the recovery time, I don't think anyone knows what the future looks like. All we can do as transportation planners and performance management folks is look at these uncertain futures into different trend lines to see what it does to the future. So with that in the background, what are the next steps? We are revisiting some of our statistical models. You could see that the reliability goes down quite a notch when you are at the teetering edges, but if you are in a stable conditions, we are looking at these relationships. We are looking at the 2020 volumes to adjust our models, taking a similar approach, again, low, negative, high growth scenarios to see what picture emerges, and that will help us in revisiting our targets or maintaining the course. So this is the last slide, what I wanted to, no answers yet. We have some preliminary results. Again, October 1 is the deadline. We are working towards it, but making sure that we are bringing all our MPO partners and our regional partners on board with our decisions, making sure MnDOT SHA leadership understands these baseline changes and accounting for the COVID-19 related traffic drops. And again, working with our partners and peers to have this conversation at a state level, at a national level, at a regional level to make sure that we are all consistent to our methodologies towards performance management. And with that, thank you again for the time and the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing my fellow presenters and hearing the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Subrat. For our next presentation, I'd like to introduce Sudhir Joshi from the New Jersey DOT. Sudhir has been working for NJDOT for more than 22 years in various capacities. He's currently working as a section chief in the Mobility Planning, Congestion Management, and Technical Analysis Unit in the Division of Statewide Planning. Sudhir has facilitated the development of MAP 21 system performance measures and written procedures for New Jersey in collaboration with MPOs and other regional partners, and continues to coordinate on the requirements with the interagency and interstate complete team. Okay, take it away, Sudhir.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sudhir Joshi, and we are here at Target Setting Ministries webinar number 4. So I'll give some background of New Jersey Department of Transportation. We are having about 3,200 employees and about 2,755 miles of state, interstate, stalls, and authority roadways. And that includes also Palisades Interstate Parkway. We are 11th in population and 1st in population density statewide. And we have 3 MPOs. Our state is fully covered by 3 MPOs, which is North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, and South Jersey Transportation Planning Organization. And we have major authority roadways, Parkway, New Jersey Turnpike, Atlantic City Expressway, and Palisades Parkway. We have public transportation with the rails, which is PATH. We have PATH authorities. We have the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. We have also Delaware Valley Port Authority, New Jersey Transit, and also PATCO line, which covers Philadelphia, New Jersey, Camden area. And there are also some private bus carriers. So our main thinking is that the millennials and empty nesters are driving the demand for mixed-use walkable downtowns. And there are underserved and disabled residents. They need reliable transportation options. And now we are in this new era that we have to deal with pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So we have to observe and provide for the future of COVID-19 effects on the transportation. You can move next slide. So you can move next slide. So how do we coordinate with all these agencies that are, are operating in New Jersey? So we have formed a complete team a long time ago, back in 2014, end of 2014. We decided to collaborate with the planners and operators of New Jersey, whose mission is to facilitate better linkages between regional transportation planning and investment decision making, and also the TSMOs. You can move next slide. So you can go back one more slide. Right. So who are our complete team members? So our members represent many organizations in planning, operations, and big data. So it's not only the agencies within DOT, but we also participate with Transcom, with University NJIT, with CAT Lab, that everyone knows about. But we are participating with, collaborating with NJTPA, DVRPC, SCTPO, Port Authority, Parkway, Turnpike, New Jersey Transit, Atlantic City Expressway, Federal Highway. Also, with the division office, we are constantly in touch with our players there, and also CAT Lab, NJIT and Transcom. So this is the makeup of our complete team. And when this rule, we knew this rule is coming up, our team was already in place. So we started meeting with our regional partners and start discussing how do we handle this one. And this started way before when the final rules came out. You can move next slide, please. So we took this approach, when the notice of proposed rulemaking came out in 2016, we started meeting with our complete team members and started discussing what is important. So in the NPRM, when we had to submit our comments to ASHTO and ultimately to the docket, we make sure each region's needs are included in our discussion. So NJTPA, North Jersey Transportation Planning, which is close to New York, it has different needs and demands versus South Jersey area versus Philadelphia region or in DVRPC. So we have 3 unique MPOs where their demands and needs are very unique. So we needed to come together to discuss how do we provide our unified comments so that it would be incorporated in the final rule that would come out. And that's what we did. So in 2016, we had a lot of discussions on NPRM. Finally, we submitted our comments. And during that time, CAT Lab was doing some TNC conflations, and we are fortunate to have Michael Pack and his staff come over to NJDOT in our complete team meeting and show us how they are going about it. So we got some flavor of what is involved ahead. And we started preparing for ourselves that this is what we would be involved. We would need to do this one. So we started gearing up our efforts and started getting our staff ready for this work. We can move on next slide. So my thinking was what approach we took in setting initial targets and coordination with planning partners. We had opportunities. So prior to the FHWA's workshop on system performance PM3 rule, that was in August 17, which we attended in Cambridge, Massachusetts with our MPO partner there. We had already 2 complete team meetings prior to that. And we had initial rule that came out. We had reviewed those rules. We had a lot of discussions going on. So we are kind of knew what's involved. And this, this workshop gave us jumpstart. We had more, our ideas were more clearer then. And we came back and started sharing with our partners, and everyone went back to their offices, did the work they needed to do to bring back to the complete team meetings. And we had some discussions on TPM pull fund initiatives. By the way, very good presentation just before that from 1 to 15. That was very good, Christos and Matt. We discussed on coordination requirements and agreements. We had discussions on data requirements and analysis, challenges, and we started NPM RDS TNC corrections. And I'll talk about a little later what we saw that initiated this task. We discussed some tools, discussions on tools. We started talking about target settings and schedules. What should we consider when we set the targets? I'm sure the tools would give us some numbers, but what to make out of it? Are we going to take the face value of the numbers and just submit that, or are we going to think about it, what it represents? Does it represent our entire state? Because this is a statewide target, so we have to make sure all 3 MPO regions are represented properly in this target setting process. And we discussed, trial time reliability, PHED measures, as you know, and truck travel time reliability, and CMAC on-road mobility source emissions, and non-SOV travels. Can move next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about a little bit our approach as well as the challenges what we faced while doing this work. So in 2018, because that was the very critical year for us. So 2017, we went back and did a lot of work internally, look at the TMC network and start conflating and see what's going on. And in 2018, we had normally we have 4 complete team meetings throughout the year. But before October 1st, in 2018, we did 6 complete team meetings instead of 4 for the whole year, and 1 data and agreement subcommittee meeting. So that way, when we had data subcommittee meeting, we only talk about data. We brought out all the issues, we faced with the conflation, we needed whatever data that we need, how do we handle that? And whom should we approach? How do we correct these TNC networks, So that we discussed, and those complete team meeting discussions, all these MPO partners, they really, everyone poured their heart out, and they really brought everything possible that we can think of on the table so that we can handle in timely manner, and including our FHWA partners. We have, along with these, complete team meetings, we had NJTPAs and URPC's region urbanized area coordination meetings going on, because PHED measures were handled by NJTPA because 2 big regions, so they were doing New York, New Jersey region in NJTPA, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and New Jersey were in the URPC region, and some part of SJTPA were part of the URPCs, and some was in NJTPAs. So we all were involved. Our meetings sometimes were focused on system performance, but when we go to urbanized area, we were all focused. All MPOs would attend other MPOs meetings also. So they know what's going on. How do we handle? Because this is new for everyone. So we had many meetings for urbanized area coordination meetings, which next series number 5 would be discussed in there. And there are some issues that we handled with the posted speed limit data that we had to provide to CATLAB. So we took care of that. We discussed data requirements, challenges for each PM3 measures, And finally, we submitted verification of TNC links with HPMS to CATLAB. So when I was looking at the network, and with our staff members, DOT partners, we were looking at the network. We found that there are some routes in NPM-RDS network. There are some routes ending with interstate, were put into interstate mix of the routes, interstate NHS. And for example, I-95 New Jersey is also called New Jersey Turnpike. So any routes ending with New Jersey Turnpike were put into that mix. We noticed that thing, and we collectively decided to look at this network. So we coordinate with all the MPOs, NJTPA, DVRPC, SJTPO, and our DOT staff with all our freight partners and our division. We really put work and check our NPM-RDS TNC links against HPMS, 2017 HPMS. And at that time, we picked 2017 because it was available to us. So we compare all the network. We corrected all this data and sent it out to CATLAB and Texas A&M Institute. Can move next slide. So I'm going to talk about a little bit challenges and barriers and how we overcome. So as I talked, the NPM-RDS data there are some incorrect links, and we continue to verification. We submitted. So we realized if we have bad network, we will get bad data out. Right? So if we decide if we look at those reliability targets and other targets and set our targets based on those numbers, it's not gonna hold in a long run. In 2 years when mid performance, which is now, and 4 years target. So we want to make sure the network is as accurate as possible, and all the data that goes into this network are more accurate. And there was issues with the posted speed limit. So our Transcom, who is our partner, one of the partner of Complete Team, they had done conflation of TNC links, and they were able to pull that data into NPM-RDS network. And we submitted that. So the posted speed limit data really helped us to calculate the PHD measures. And so whatever challenges for the data and other aspects kept coming, we were collectively we were able to solve very easily. And there was issues of forecasting for reliability and aligning projections and targets. So there were no historical data available. We had looked at here and INRIX data in past, but the NPM-RDS network is different from INRIX data. So we could not really use that. So we purchased 2016 NPM-RDS data, but we had corrected our TMC network, NPM-RDS network. So we could not really rely on that 2016 data because we did not get a chance to look at that and see what are the issues with that network. So that gave us some ballpark figure. And then once we had confidence that we had corrected our network good enough that we can rely on 2017 network. So that data we use, then we consider the policies used in different regions and how do we combine together with that number that we get from PDA suite. What do we make out of it? And how do we know in 2 years and 4 years that number would hold more closely as it is now? So we had a lot of discussions about it, in subsequent Complete Team meetings. And finally, in one of the meeting in September, which is prior to October 1st, 2018, we made up the decision and we started submitting our targets, And overall, we considered the holistic approach. We considered, walkability. People are using different modes of transportation. People are driving. What are the level of congestions in North Jersey area near the New York borders? What's happening near the Philadelphia region, in that vicinity? What happens in South Jersey area? And we are being a corridor state. We have a lot of through traffic, truck traffics from both sides of our states. So we have to consider all those aspects to come up with our targets. And finally, we decide to set our targets. And once we've done that, you can move next slide, please. So we started thinking about now we had to prepare the written procedures. So we looked at every aspect. We started talking to our transit partners, and we finally, also had discussion with our FHWA partners, division office, and we come up with this solution that we're gonna, resolve all the conflicts and issues that are arising. And we collectively decided, with guidance from FHWA, that at this point we'll not include the transit partners in our written procedures, because there are a lot of issues, all these approvals and lawyers got involved and those kind of things would happen. So we call it, instead of agreements, we call it, written procedures or written provisions, and make it simpler so that we all agreed upon, all the MPOs and DOT, NJDOT agreed upon, these are the terms we're going to include. So with collective effort, the benefit was that there was no conflict because we all agreed, we meet, we reviewed the data, we brought all the issues on the table, and that's how we didn't have any issues. It was well-documented procedures, and it relieved the burden on single agency. So NJDOT was not only responsible to develop that, so it was done in agreement with all the agencies, involved in our complete team. And there were some challenges, I'm not going to go into detail. You can review these slides after that. And if you need more information, we can provide that. Can move on next slide, please. So this is the full cycle of MAP 21 system performance measures that we follow. So we looked at our schedule and elements, then we looked at the transportation performance data. We looked at the establishment of the performance targets, the reporting of the targets in PMF that we were able to do, and we completed written procedures. And now we are at this point, that midpoint performance period target setting adjustment process. So we are in discussion with our partners, and in fact, we have one complete team meeting coming up on September 10th, where we're going to be discussing and finalizing our targets. So when we have to submit by October 1st, we would be ready to do that. So that's our goal. And we'll discuss why we need to keep the target same or why we change it. Because the COVID-19 would not affect this 2 years adjustment midpoint performance targets because we use 2019 data. But what will happen in 4 years, that would be important because that data would be affected by COVID-19. We don't know the effects, how many companies would be allowing their employees to work from home, or people would be traveling in public transits, or how many people will be traveling on the roadways. There are so many things to consider. So we're gonna go over all this and make good judgment on our targets, and we'll submit them. And we'll also adjust the 4-year targets if we need to adjust. So one thing I would like to mention here for a full performance period, 4-year targets, this period would be counted in 2022. So this pandemic should be considered, and we might need more guidance. Can move last slide, please. And thank you very much. And it was I'm very happy to talk about. Any questions?
All right, thank you very much, Sudhir. And yes, please add any questions for Subrat or Sudhir in the Q&A section of the menu bar. Okay, so I'm pleased to have Dan Blevins joining us from the Wilmington Area Planning Council, or WILMAPCO. Dan is a principal transportation planner with WILMAPCO, where he's worked for the past 19 years. His areas of expertise at the agency include freight and goods movement planning, congestion management, demographic forecasting, sub-regional studies, and also serves as the agency's GIS database administrator. Before his tenure at WILMAPCO, he worked as a program manager for the University of Delaware and as a GIS analyst for the Newcastle County Water Resources Agency. Now I'll turn it over to Dan.
Thank you. Good afternoon. What I pretty much had planned to talk about today is, how WILMAPCO has been tackling the weaving of these performance measures into, I guess you want to call it, the everyday life of MPOs. Just a little bit about us. WILMAPCO is we're located here in Newcastle County, Delaware, and also Cecil County, Maryland. So we are a two-county, two-state MPO. Roughly around 660,000 people. And as you can see from the map, we are conveniently sandwiched between Philadelphia and the Baltimore area. It was mentioned in the earlier presentations, when it comes to the performance measures, the two big ones for the PHED and non-SOV, we have to do a fair amount of coordinating with DVRPC, South Jersey MPO, Lancaster County, for our, for these measures here. So at least a little bit of scale on where we kind of fit within the region here. So as I said, my main goal today is to talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons we found about getting TPM, at the national level, a little bit deeper into our planning process. So we've kind of begun on the compulsory exercises about trying to embed them into our, standard documents, the RTP. We caught a break on this one as we adopted it in 2019. So we were able to really bring in the, we had everybody just finished up their 2018 current conditions report. So it was easy to get some of those first cuts at the 2 and 4 year targets, nice and neat, tied into our long range plan. Now, what we've done to kind of find a better home, quote unquote, for all of the measures is we've created an appendix into our TIP every year when we do it. Simply the TIP gets updated every, or at least now we do every 2 years. At least it's a regularly viewed and seen document that as we make changes to this, there's it's a nice home that we're able to kind of adopt everything, together. One thing we've also done, and I saw that Subrat had a few of these, charts on here about the, reliability. But as we get some of the measured data, year after year, we can kind of start plotting out the, some of these charts here to kind of see where we are in relationship to those targets. So it's something that we found that just kind of has worked well, and also kind of helps us keep tabs on keeping those fresh and keeping those updated annually as the new, kind of the in-between years of data comes out for us to use. So a little bit on the pro and con, we've found that what, our experience has been in trying to, implement and or work with these. First and foremost, I think the idea of the regional coordination has been quite a help and very good to, to everybody involved. It's always nice to meet new people. So as we've been putting some of these together on a technical level, as the two that we had to work with the DVRPC on about the PHED and also non-SOV, we've been able to, we've obviously had a very good relationship all the time with DVRPC. We work very well and very often with them. But I know that was part of the, one of the ideas of putting these measures in here is to have that, cooperation. Some of their parts of the country may or may not be as, open with talking with others. We found that out, but so far so good on this one. The thing I found is it's the measures, and actually more importantly, I guess the data available has been a big help for freight. As you heard in my intro, I do wear the, one of the hats I do wear is about freight and goods movement, but having this data available, to be able to pull from other states really has helped in the idea of, the better, bigger picture of what freight means, how well it is or not within your area. Certainly Delaware has its problems, but when you put some of these maps together, as I have here on the regional scale, it starts to paint a little better picture about, what freight means in the larger picture within our region. It also, I know we haven't talked about too much here today about the truck bottlenecks, which is being woven into the upcoming October report. That data was a big help in us being able to show why we chose the bottlenecks that we did. I think, let's see, my favorite part of what we've gotten out of the performance measures is that it's really brought the idea of reliability data into the forefront for making better transportation planning decisions. So it's something we've been doing here at WILMAPCO for a long time. We are very close to the University of Delaware, starting back in, about 1998 with the GPS travel time runs. We started looking at, peak hour, travel times and what the changes were, throughout the day. But we've been able to kind of start to layer this on using it on a regional scale, mainly from the performance measures that we've, that have been set forth, by the feds, but also getting that data down into a corridor sub area, even down to the operational level, so that we can start to use that, layered into more, try to bring it out and use it a little bit more whenever we're able to. The second derivative of that has been, because everything is so GIS based, it's been very easy for us to, kind of create materials to try to get it back out to the general public and our decision makers. So, we're having a nice GIS format and having it available, we can, things like our CMP process, start to show some of that data and to introduce and to kind of keep hitting people with that idea of reliability. Commonly, what we end up hearing a lot in, in our general, traditional planning circles, volume over capacity or peak hour, intersection level of service. This has been able to help on a larger scale bring that out a little bit more, as a more tried and true measure that we're able to have as big data. I know we're all tired of hearing that phrase, but as big data has become more accessible, more we can get it ingrained into the planning process, the better. Now, a little bit more on where the rubber hits the road on this, about what we've seen so far with, with the measures and looking at our 2 and 4 year targets. It's certainly not enough time to really looking at moving the needle. Has project X produced, Y results in reducing, or trying to achieve our targets, for obviously capital programs or capital projects. Take too long to kind of get any real feedback that has been happening as a result of those. I would say that we've had some small improvements with using, that type of data, as I mentioned before, about corridor and sub area, but also our operational work. The ability of having that 24/7 travel time reliability data, we've applied heavily on looking at signal retimings. We've been able to work with DelDOT on saying, okay, here's, what we've seen. We do the higher level planning and saying, hey, here's a corridor that has, woefully bad travel time reliability. This is a great candidate for our, for retiming this year. Quickly followed up by looking at what happened afterwards. So we've been able to get some, some easier, smaller wins by using this, using this type of, data format for, producing results and showing it to our decision makers and public. I think some of this kind of been alluded a little bit on how data has changed, looking at the ADTs and truck volumes and segments that have been changed and swapped in and out. Changing those inputs make for obviously some odd outputs. So if you look at the peak hour of excessive delay data here for the Philly area, we were hovering in the low 16s for our hourly data. The 2019 data is at 14.6. So, that's something that we've had in our internal discussions on how do we handle that, as, it certainly does change. The red line is showing you what a linear trend looks like, and you can see where we had our 2 and 4 year targets. So how do we, these are some of the challenges that we faced about, what this data is showing us. Oops, one more. The relaying of the travel time index as a measure when we get to the public, especially at the public level, has been challenging. You know, the large scale number, you know, some people it becomes a little bit harder for them to, you know, try to process even at the, you know, at our council level on, you know, we want to go from 1.6 down to 1.4, you know, like, well, really, what does that mean? So we've been, and especially at our you know, at a few of other projects that we've had, we've used this data and reused it and try to come up with a better way to show it, you know, through illustrations. This one here on the map or on the page here, you know, looking at just simply overall travel times on the US 202 corridor and what it looks like during the day. You know, trying to get something that kind of can stick, that is able to resonate with folks. But in the end, you know, they say, hey, what does this mean for in front of my house? And honestly, they say, just tell me how long it takes. You know, I can think about that, you know, AM and PM and overnight. You know, that has been something that has resonated. So we've been trying to, you know, try different ways to say, how can this be, you know, useful at a more localized level. We have also been able to at least trying to work with the operations community about, you know, breaking it down into something that starts to talk a little bit about congestion and its duration. I know that, you know, the heat maps and things like that and some other easy button items that are on the NPM RDMS website, you know, has kind of led to us being able to generate, you know, something of this nature, start talking about, you know, durations of congestion on, you know, given street segments, you know, getting down to a more localized level. The operations community has found this very helpful when we start looking at some smaller, you know, improvements to be made and start to get the idea of where you're seeing some of the longer congestions. Is it a half hour of delay, or are we looking at, you know, 2 and 3 hours worth of, you know, delay at different spots? Local perception of what congestion means by trying to measure it to the national standards has also been something that's been brought up, you know, up here. You know, if we look at the level of, you know, travel time reliability, you know, what was called the peak is from 6 to 10 a.m. The PM peak is 4 to 8 p.m. But in many circles, you know, most things looking at a 1 hour peak. So when you're trying to relay one versus another, it's been, you know, sometimes struggling saying about, you know, why is that peak so long versus with, you know, the other, you know, either your county code or the DelDOT, you know, standards are looking at a 1 hour peak period. It's, you know, trying to hard to mesh those two together, and, you know, even doing any type of overlay has chosen to be, you know, has proven to be a little bit more of a, you know, a bit of a problem. And we do more explaining. I think in you know, with the data work that I do, if I spend more time having to explain the data, I didn't do a very good job of showing the data. So when we try to layer those over top of each other, it really is difficult to explain. One of the examples that I kind of brought out is if you look to the map to the left of northern Newcastle County, that is taking the 2019 travel time reliability data. And as you can see, there are some yellows and oranges on there, you know, looking at anything above 1.5. Taking that data and looking at maybe a shorter AM and PM peak period, you can see here, you know, the 7 to 9 AM and 4 to 6 PM. The map, you know, jumps a little bit more. You start seeing some of the darker colors show up on on certain segments. So when I do my congestion, you know, my CMP work, you know, we do look at more of a localized time period versus, let me see here real quick. Oh, sorry. We have, you know, you can just see a little bit of differences if somebody looks at it one way versus the other. So it almost looks a little bit more watered down in the, you know, as we look at the national measures versus the maybe the closer, more specific AM and PM peak periods. So with that, thank you, and look forward to any questions we get in the chat box.
All right, thank you, Dan. All right, so wrapping up our agency presentations today, we'll hear from Michael Iacono of the Minnesota DOT. Michael's a Senior Research and Analysis Specialist in MnDOT's Office of Transportation System Management. His current work involves measurement of travel time reliability and delay on the National Highway System in accordance with MAP 21 TPM requirements, along with program evaluation and economic analysis studies. Michael is a member of the Planning and Economy Research Council at the University of Minnesota Center for Transportation Studies and is a member of TRB's Committee on Transportation and Economic Development. Take it away, Michael.
Thanks for the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. So I was asked to talk about some of the challenges that MnDOT has encountered in the process of target setting for the system performance and reliability measures. And as I was thinking about how to present these, I kind of mentally sorted the challenges we've faced into issues that can be a bit more technical in nature and those that are a bit more planning or policy oriented. And I'll deal with each of those in succession. So as a reminder, what we're talking about here are the main PM3 or system performance and reliability measures. We're talking specifically about the interstate and non-interstate NHS measures. The truck travel time reliability measure is technically not one of those measures, but it's conceptually similar. And for practical purposes, we've been dealing with it at the same time we've worked with target setting for the PM3 measures when we've met with our MPOs and presented it to our senior leadership. And as a reminder, if I refer to LOTCR during the course of this presentation, I'm just referring to that basic segment level metric data that is calculated for each of the time periods and which forms the basis of the system performance measures. So we'll begin with technical issues. Perhaps the greatest issue facing anyone involved in target setting for any of these measures is uncertainty. And what could be more emblematic of uncertainty right now than COVID-19 pandemic? It's already had a large impact on the performance of our transportation systems, particularly in urban areas. And there's also still a great deal of uncertainty about when it's going to abate, and if and when it does, will things revert back to the way they were before the pandemic, or will we have to adjust to a new set of conditions? This can be a difficult thing to plan for when we're talking about 2 or 4 year timeframes. So like most of the states and MPOs who have dealt with this target setting activity, the first thing we did was to try and establish a historical time trend. This is the statewide interstate travel time reliability data for Minnesota going back to 2013, and for 2019 is the most recent full year for which we have data. And thankfully for the interstate data, the trend is pretty stable. The values range between about 79.5 and about 82. So we just took a look at that and said, well, we're close to 80, and that seems like a reachable goal, or a reachable target for us over 2 and 4 year periods, so we'll adopt it that way. The truck travel time reliability index was fairly similar in that it's also using the interstate as the basis for its calculation. And the one difference there is that the measure is drawing data specifically for commercial trucks, so it's not using the whole data set. But again, the data are pretty stable, and particularly from 2017 on, which is the NPM RDS version 2, the data provided by INRIX, the values are pretty stable. They've been inching up a little bit, but they've generally stayed below 1.5, and that's where we've set our target for truck travel time reliability. The strange case here, and the one that illustrates the issue of uncertainty, is the non-interstate NHS travel time reliability data. So I'm taking you back 2 years here to look at what we were looking at when we approached this target setting issue in 2018 to set our baseline targets. So at that point, we had 5 years of historical data, and 4 of those corresponded to the HERE NPM RDS data from 2013 to 2016. So the question here is, what is the actual baseline? The 2017 data showed a significant break from the previous trend. So was that what we should be looking at going forward and extrapolating in the future, or should we base it on that previous series? Well, our response was simply to take a look at the old data and assume that we could reach that 75% target level, and that we would just simply kind of kick the can on this one and wait until more and better data come in in the future and revisit it using the flexibility that's built into the target setting process and revisit it in 2020. So at the time that those targets were set, we were looking at interstate reliability targets of 80% for 2 and 4 years, 1.5 for freight reliability, and 75% for non-interstate NHS. Then once the 2018 data became available, we revisited this to find out what things looked like. And of course, as you can see on the right-hand side of the chart here, perhaps it's a bit obscured, that new trend was in fact starting to emerge based on the interstate data, and it looked like our performance was actually closer to 90% statewide as opposed to 80%. But we were still about a year away from that performance period where we could actually revise our targets. So what happens when we add in 2019? Whoops, got ahead of myself there. So by 2019, it's pretty much confirmed that the index data values are probably closer to the ones we're actually looking for and most closely represent our actual performance level. So we met with our MPOs about 2 days ago on Monday and discussed this issue and the updates we've had. We've actually proposed based on that we move up to a 90% target for our 4-year target. Now, another technical issue that comes up, and we're one of the states who makes use of the NPM RDS analytics tools made available by the CAT Lab at the University of Maryland, is data accuracy and quality. So one of the outputs that this platform can provide is a mapped output for any given reference area, including the state or any MPO, or even an urbanized area for the peak hour excessive delay measure. And you'll get a measure of the coverage of the data in terms of the miles of the network, that particular part of the NHS network for which you have valid data. So this particular corridor that I zoomed in on here is a corridor of US Highway 10 up in the northern suburbs of the Twin Cities. It's the corridor between Anoka and between Highway 610 here down the south. It's about an 8-mile corridor. It's pretty heavily traveled. The volumes there vary between about 80,000 and 100,000 vehicles a day. As you can see, there are several segments here that are shaded in gray. That indicates that there were no valid data for that particular period. So, and this is metro-wide we're talking about with this measure boxed in red here, that there's 98.7% of the miles on the NHS network have valid data. But these are ones we're going to have to go back and look into and see if we can update, because if there are no valid data that are available for the calculation, then those segments simply get left out. And we're not getting a complete measure of what reliability looks like. So when it comes to data accuracy and quality, it's up to states and MPOs to really do their own quality control. So you have to look for instances of missing data like that. You have to review your own TMC network and find if there are missing links, because sometimes those can be hard to identify as well. Check them for completeness, and report any NHS network updates that may be missing. Look in the results for missing data errors and possible outliers. And all these issues affect our ability to understand the present and also to predict the future. So now let's transition to some of the planning and process issues that emerged during the planning process. So as Dan was referring to in his presentation, one of the difficult issues with some of the reliability measures is communicating them. And this isn't just a matter of communicating to the lay public, but to people who are actually working for other divisions of your organization or MPOs or other people who are stakeholders in this process and who may not have several months of time to devote to learning how these measures work. And because there's some similarity between the interstate and non-interstate measures, but also some subtle differences between them and the truck travel time reliability measures, I tried to put together a simple table that would highlight some of the basic characteristics and also highlight how they differ from each other. So there are differences in the numerator and the metric calculation, the weighting criterion for the individual segments, whether or not there's a threshold level for segment reliability and what that is, where the measure applies, and what types of travel time data are used in the calculation, whether it's passenger vehicles and trucks or some subset. And in addition to this, you also have to ask the question, why are these issues important to other groups? So when we talk to the MPOs about this, like many states, Minnesota is a state with a large metropolitan area that kind of dominates the state in terms of the emergence of reliability and system performance issues. So if you look at our state, which has 8 different MPOs, and 4 of those are bi-state MPOs, they generally don't have a lot of major issues related to reliability. So you have to really impress upon them why this matters to them. And that can mean zeroing in on, mapping the results and zeroing in on individual areas where there might be issues. But it also means just relaying to them what it means for them to plan for projects that affect the state's overall reliability. And the same kinds of discussions can be had with district staff, for example, district planners and engineers, and especially when we present these measures to senior leadership, because they ultimately have to approve the targets before we send them out. There's also the matter of the nature of these targets. So are they expected outcomes based on projects that we already have programmed for the next couple of years, or are they active goals that we're going to be pursuing? And how would that affect resource allocation? That comes into play in Minnesota because we have a state highway investment plan, which is referred to as MnSHIP, which has a number of different functional areas or objectives for the system, and we've highlighted them under a few different headings here. The ones where reliability would probably fall would be these ones under critical connections, where we have Twin Cities reliability, or Twin Cities mobility and Greater Minnesota mobility, possibly also freight. But of course, there are at least a dozen other objectives that are built into that. And so if more money becomes available, where is that money going to go? When you're setting targets, you're implicitly making statements about resource allocation and how important you think these relative ideas are. So just a few lessons that we can use to summarize our experience with target setting. First of all, there are many possible approaches to this, and ours is just one of many. So in Subrat's presentation, he gave us an example of how modeling and forecasting can be used to support the target setting process. There are, of course, many other ways to do it too. We've seen a couple of other presentations about how other states and MPOs have dealt with this issue. And I do want to impress upon the states and MPOs that are actually going through this process to take advantage of the flexibility that's built into it. Revisit it every 2 years and update your targets if necessary, or revisit the data sooner if you think it's important. Get more and better information, especially more recent information where you can. This helps to reduce uncertainty. Make use of the existing and archived data, NPM RDS analytics data that you have. If you have access to the analytics platform, you can obtain data not just for your own areas, but also for other states and MPOs, which can be used for things like benchmarking and peer group comparisons. And communication about PM3 measures is a bit of a challenge. So the question is not only what do they mean, which can be a bit of a challenge in and of itself, but also how can they potentially be used? And there are other possible uses for the reliability metric data. And I'll give you a couple of examples here before we go. So in Minnesota, we've used some of this metric data for things like project level evaluation and ranking. So for example, reliability is actually one of the criteria that we use in project selection. And so it helps to have baseline data on conditions in a particular location. It can be used for corridor analysis. So if you have segment level data that you can build up to a corridor level, it's just a matter of choosing an aggregation process for putting together a measure. And it can also be used for things like freight bottleneck identification, which we've actually just completed another round of here. And we've made use of the metric data from the interstate and non-interstate reliability to form the basis of our calculations. So I think I'll leave it there and allow us some time to move on to questions. My contact information is available here. I'd prefer to be contacted by email if possible here, because that phone number is my office number. And of course, like most people, I'm working remotely at this point.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, great. I jumped ahead of you, Michael, but thank you for that presentation. So that concludes our excellent presentations for today. Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to all of our attendees. Now it's time to hear from all of you in the Q&A. So we've been capturing the Q&A and we're gonna just go through them as they were asked. So our first question is, I think our first two questions are for Nelson. The first one is additional guidance forthcoming regarding making a case for extenuating circumstances for missed targets as part of the October report? Nelson? Nelson, are you on mute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay,
There are
great.
some
Sorry about that.
people who need to be muted, so I hear a little background, but not you, Nelson.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah. So the question about extenuating circumstances, I think that if the document I showed, which I think was pretty quick about, sorry about that, but on the FHWA TPM website under guidance, there is the input fields document, and those are for the performance management form. And if you go in there, there are some additional details surrounding, the specific questions surrounding the extenuating circumstances. And if there's further questions, I would suggest that whoever's asking that question work with their state Federal Highways Division office to look. We are developing the PMF is under test procedures right now, and it will be open no later than September 1st. But please, just take a look at the existing document that's on our website right now.
All right, Nelson, another question for you. How will FHWA address the TMC changes that were made to the NPRMDS in assessing target attainment?
Right. So actually, I've been in a little bit of a conversation to sort through that. But so right now, the TMC changes shouldn't be an issue for meeting targets, and I think that if it is, and I believe it is, then that should be explained in the mid-performance period progress report. There are opportunities and fields in that document for explanation about additional information that is needed, fields directly related to the individual performance measures.
All right. Our next question is to Dan, and it's that the table comparing travel time reliability to level of service is interesting. What is that based on? And this is referring to the little table that's on the right side of slide 54.
Yes, that is something, as we've been trying to, come up with ways better to, relate this to the public. And I don't know how I'm assuming it's very similar in the rest of the country, but I always like to say Newcastle County has the largest concentration of amateur traffic engineers in the world, for various reasons on certain policies. So the idea was to try to come up with a way that would, at least kind of mimic that, level of service, D, E, and F, to kind of put some gradations in the question of reliability, unreliability. So through our congestion management process and the group of folks that we have involved in there, along with talking to some other folks at the Traffic Management Center in DelDOT, what would make at least a little bit of sense. And as you can see the chart, the LOS is in quotes for that very reason, because it's something that we've been trying to use to set up those gradations. Using 1.5 as the, kind of the beginning of the break point of, reliability versus unreliability from what we've gotten from, from the federal highway work. And then, as things move up the chain in an area that's, 1.5, or an area that's, 3 times that, the uncongested travel, just to try to put that level of kind of like a severity index to, to these, to the data that we are getting, to try to have, to try to come up with a visual like this that will, something that will relay. And as I said, we've been throwing a lot of things at the public for this to kind of see what sticks. And this was one of those, the ideas that has seemed to has worked out reasonably well for trying to communicate this to a larger audience.
Thanks, Dan. The next question is for everyone. Thank you all for your presentations. Is anyone going to change your 4-year targets based on your modeling or evaluations of how the COVID pandemic could have prolonged impacts on travel reliability? Or are you treating the improved reliability as a positive impact of this pandemic? Who wants to answer first?
This is Subrat. I can take a stab at it, or someone else, doesn't matter.
Go ahead, Subrat.
Sure. So as of now, looking at the data, it looks like we might have to revisit our target. Now, you could make an argument that if we stick to the original targets, we would be conservative and we would be fine, but that's not the intent of performance management and why Federal Highway is looking at the program from a PM3 standpoint. So the answer is, while there are some risks, we will likely opt for renewed targets that accounts for the baseline changes. I don't necessarily think that, okay, the pandemic has improved reliability is a good thing. It reminds me of the Great Recession we had a few years back where streets were empty, but the reason was lack of economic activity. So again, it's an outcome of the existing circumstances. We acknowledge that, and we also, there is a message to be conveyed that as volumes go up, so does the reliability performance implications. So that is a message that we are also sharing with our constituents, with our customers and stakeholders. So in short, contingent on leadership approval and our MPO partners and everyone, our stakeholders providing their opinions, we might look at revisiting our targets for Maryland.
Thanks, Subrat. Anyone else?
This is Dan. Go ahead. This is Dan. I would say, just like everything else in 2020, we just want to put an asterisk next to it and just say, here's 2020, and we just have to, we acknowledge its existence, and that's really about it. But I believe on the, since DelDOT is doing the main work on this now, obviously with communication with us, is the question is kind of not right now, knowing that there's so many, there will be differences, and it was mentioned, obviously everything is based on the 2019 total. 2020 could look an awful lot different, and it will look different. But how long does that last? And I think even in our urbanized, the PHED discussions that we've had with, at the collective level with the DBRPC and whatnot, the idea is that they all may have some impacts. Do people, like the non-SOV, do people start driving more because they are fearful of getting on mass transit again? So I have a feeling in another year or so we may be having these, another panel discussion like this as we start to, read the tea leaves of what we may or may not be seeing, in the post-COVID world. So say right now it's almost like we have these now for October, and we'll all be kind of watching the data as it comes in and wherever we can get it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Michael from MnDOT. This issue actually came up on Monday when we were meeting with our MPOs. So the Metropolitan Council, which is the MPO for the metropolitan area, had a planner who mentioned this. And I basically told them the same thing that I did in my presentation here. It's that conditions may temporarily improve, but there's just so much uncertainty surrounding the duration of this pandemic and whether conditions will revert after it's over, whether there'll be different work arrangements, that it's just impossible to forecast right now. So things could improve, but I don't know where we set that mark. I mean, we're only about 6 months into this, and there's no end in sight. So who knows where we'll be 2 and 4 years from now? I just don't think it's the right time to address that issue.
Yeah. I have a magic 8-ball on my desk, and I could probably shake that and get as just a good answer out of it as any of us could kind of kind of do some spitballing on it now. But yeah, it's people want to know, but it's nearly impossible to say exactly to have any basis of what we can say what we think, but there's really not much to support what it may look like a year, 6 months, or 12 months or 18 months from now.
Hey,
Yeah,
Dan,
hi.
this is Subrat. I used to work in travel forecasting in my past life, so the answer is 3.67.
Excellent.
Yeah, hi. Hi, this is Sudhir Joshi from MnDOT. We had some discussions about updating the targets or keep the targets. And to my knowledge, so far, we have not decided to update the targets because we don't know. There are a lot of uncertainties. What's going to lie ahead, we don't know. But whatever we decide, we'll make a note when we report in the PMF, Performance Management Form. And also, we know that in 2022, which is a 4-year period, which would be completed, when we look at the data during that time, we would capture this COVID-19 effects. But at that time, we know that the targets that we're going to do would be baseline for the next performance period. So we will adjust our numbers according to what we decide at that point. But right now, we are still in discussions, and to me, it looks like it may not change, but we'll see what happens in September 10th complete team meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Sudhir. All right, our final question is for Subrat, and it says, it looks like the first presentation used R to generate many of their charts. Do you share your scripts on GitHub?
So yeah, the answer is yes. Our data scientists used R for some of the scripts, and I know we have shared some of those scripts with some peer DOTs. So if you could send me an email, I can connect you and we can talk offline to see how those arrangements could be made. And again, it's a GitHub community, so the intent here is to share scripts and grow as an industry. So hope that answers your question.
All right, thank you. So as we mentioned earlier, this is the fourth in a 5-part target setting mini-series. The next episode of this mini-series will be held in 2 weeks on August 26th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. In 2 weeks, we'll round out and it will be on traffic, congestion, and emission reduction target setting. Presentations will address decision analysis methods for setting targets, making CMAQ targets meaningful to the public, and target setting and related planning and programming challenges. Our presenters will include Brian Hoft from the Regional Transportation Council in Nevada, Habd Kassa from the Georgia DOT, and Keith Miller from the New Jersey TPA. As always, please continue to send us ideas for future webinars you'd like to see. I'd also like to mention that if you're interested in visualization and communication, the next TAM webinar, which will be a week from today on the 19th at 2 p.m., is going to be on visualization and communication for asset management. So please join us for that as well. So please visit the TPM portal. That's tpm-portal.com to get more information about the webinar series and other resources as well. And we hope to see you for the future webinars, potentially the TAM one next week, and then the congestion emission one in 2 weeks at 2 p.m. Bye-bye, everybody.